Okay, so thanks everyone. I'm Ray Valdes. A little bit about my background. I was at Gartner for 15 years. My background's in software technology. I built and architected large-scale mission-critical systems in the past. Started looking at blockchain technology 4 years ago while I was at Gartner, and I joined ConsenSys 6 weeks ago. The cool thing about ConsenSys is you can choose your job title. It's kind of decentralized, peer-to-peer entity. So I said, well, I'm CTO, where T stands for transformation. But actually, when joining, I realized that this really is a very decentralized company. And there are no chiefs. There are no chief officers. Instead, they're chefs, which is what happens when you take the I, you remove the I out of chief. So I guess I'm transformation chef. And what I mean by transformation is we're looking at transformation of businesses, transformation of business processes, transformation of markets, transformation of ecosystems, transformation of economies, and often that requires internal transformation within a company. And it's not just me, everyone's doing it in the company, and as we spread out, we have about 50 different projects. There are 700 people in 27 countries, so check it out. Check out the website at consensys.net. So what I want to talk about is blockchain in China. And the focus, unlike some of the other speakers who've talked about ICOs, talked about investments, this is really about platform. What is a platform? A platform is a formal abstraction that encapsulates functionality in which developers will build solutions. So the key words are developers building something on top of something else that is a solution that's addressing a particular set of related business problems. So we're going to talk about platforms. We're also going to talk a little bit about China. How many folks have traveled by any chance to China in the last 5 years? A lot, yeah, a good number, about a third. Because what I found is that even among educated contacts and colleagues that I've met who are based in Europe, who've traveled the world, who are highly educated, they have misconceptions about what China is. They have a vision of maybe what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and that things are changing rapidly. So I want to spend like 5 or 7 minutes talking about that as a subject in and of itself, and then talk about blockchain, talk about the role of digital gold versus digital cash versus a blockchain platform, then an overview of the crypto sector in China and the blockchain platform landscape, and then I promised on this kind of clickbait session title, which platform will win. Well, I'll just give, I won't leave you in suspense. The one that will win is the one that's not yet on the market in its current form. And in fact, there is no platform that has the necessary characteristics to be a winning platform today, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So first, bear with me a little bit about China. We'll go speed through this. For those of you who have a conference bag, you may look in it, you may see hardware, physical objects. Chances are they're all manufactured in China. But that's not where the value is. The value is in intellectual property. The 5 most valued companies in the world are Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. On a given day, they're 500 billion and up, racing to be the first $1 trillion most valued company. That's as a result of intellectual property and services, a layer on top of the hardware. And you can see that, let me back up. And often they're associated with Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley has dominated global technology industry for more than 40 years across multiple generations of technology, semiconductors, mini computers, graphics workstations, then social media, search engines, and so on. Many regions have tried to copy its success, and they've failed. And China is well positioned to be the exception. Why has Silicon Valley succeeded? Well, the formula is no secret. And that's the thing about sustainable competitive advantage, is that even if you know the formula, it's hard to replicate. It's a combination of having talent, the brain power from universities, from immigrants, existing companies, having capital from venture funds and government, having government taking the right approach for that context, not necessarily for other contexts, having an ecosystem of enabling suppliers and labor pool, and then the culture of, the self-described California attitude of freedom, experimentation, innovation, and homebrew collaboration. So that's a particular formula that many try to emulate, and they can't do it because they don't have the talent, they don't have the capital, they don't have the right government policy, and they try to emulate the culture. But wearing black and getting a few tattoos doesn't give you that kind of effectiveness. Apple, on the back of their iPhone that they've had and other devices, it says designed by Apple in California, manufactured or assembled in China. So that's an expression of the division of labor and where the value is. And the value is in the intellectual property at the high level, but change is coming. So China has a new take. There's new ingredients: culture, government, massive scale that others cannot replicate, and the long game, a particular view of strategy. You're not going to do things for immediate results. You're playing a chess game, a game of Go that's going to go for many rounds. And I was presenting this in China. So by the way, I've been to China about 5 times in the last 2 years. Actually, I had the good fortune of meeting the premier of China in one of those. I've presented to Chinese companies. I was presenting this, and I was saying how in China they value the long game, and they've been doing this for like 500 years. And the guy told me, "You're wrong. We've been doing it for 3,000 years." So others cannot replicate this formula, even when the ingredients are well known. Culture is exemplified by Jack Ma, determination, hard work, etc. There's an emphasis on speed. They built a 57-story skyscraper in 19 days. They built a high-speed rail station, not your conventional old-fashioned subway, high-speed rail station in 9 hours. About 3,000 workers. Amazon has an idea for an electronic store, automated store. While they're talking about it, it's already a reality in China. Another ingredient is talent. The massive scale, 1.3, 1.5 billion people, combined with evolving educational system, combined with cultural values that value education and technology, you get a huge pool of brain power. The massive scale is hard to grasp. There are 160 cities with 1 million population each. Shanghai has 37 million people. I think the country of Norway is only like 8 million people, so Shanghai is about 4 Norways, and Beijing is about 3 Norways. And this allows businesses in China to scale massively. The bike-sharing industry grew from 0 to 300 million in 2 years. Didi, which is their version of Uber, which ended up acquiring Uber, had 1.4 billion rides in 1 year, which is more than Uber had since it was founded. The competitive advantage of scale results in success in categories where they have 3 times the number of solar energy jobs than the US, 3 times the electric vehicles, 5 times the battery capacity for electric vehicles, and so on. This is the competitive advantage of scale. And the role of government. Now, I'm a kind of California libertarian strain of political views, along with possibly many of you. So we're all skeptical of the role of government. So this is not a political debate, just a statement of fact that in this particular scenario, government can do certain things that are hard to do in other contexts. So look at the Shanghai subway system. 1 line in 1996. 10 years later, a few more lines. 20 years, it was the largest subway system in the world. This measured in number of miles. And Beijing, in that time, became the largest subway system in the world, measured in terms of number of passengers. While you look at San Francisco, they're arguing for 5 years of whether to put a new Muni line or not. You look at subway systems in New York, London, Rio, Toronto, LA, they've essentially unchanged in that time period. So not only have Beijing and Shanghai as the largest subway systems, they built subway systems in 40 other cities in China in the same period. Look at the Shanghai Skyline in 20 years, totally transformed. And since this picture was taken in 2010, they built another 50 or 100 buildings behind the front row. So rapid, large-scale transformation. The city of Shenzhen in 2016 built more skyscrapers in that 1 year than all cities in the US and Australia combined in that equivalent period. So the government plays a certain role. They moved 800 million people out of poverty in a few decades, and they're focused on providing capital tax incentives. And to be clear, there are many, many negatives that one can raise a critique. There's a debt-laden economy, there's heavy-handed surveillance, et cetera. We won't get into those. I'm just talking about the results. The action that results as a result of government policy. One is which to create a protected space for domestic companies, locking out Google and Facebook, and eventually Uber. So it's weird because I'm a heavy user of Gmail and Twitter and Facebook. I go to China and none of them work, and the VPNs are working to get around that are less effective every year. So the formula delivers results. How many folks have a WeChat account, by the way? Only about 5%. Well, I recommend you get one just to look, because it's an innovative integrated system. Any feature that you like in Facebook that they've introduced in the last 2 or 3 years is effectively a copy of something that's been in WeChat already. WeChat has enabled truly cashless society. You can pay for a cab, you can order food, you can schedule a dentist appointment. There's beggars on the street with QR codes. They'll accept WeChat payments. Their corner noodle shop, they don't accept cash, only WeChat or Alipay. So that's going without going to Bitcoin, without going to digital currency, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The peer-to-peer sharing economy is huge in certain areas, not just cars, bikes, hotels, but also lending, healthcare. That's a whole subject in and of itself. The result is every major US company will face a Chinese competitor as these companies are incubated within a protected space, and then they move out onto the world stage. Whether you're talking about Tesla, or Apple competing with Huawei, or Amazon competing with Alibaba. Alibaba is building a capacity of 300,000 transactions per second. You compare that, people say, well, blockchain is going to scale. We're going to try to reach Visa levels of scale, which is 4,000 on average, 47,000 peak capacity for Visa. Alibaba is 6 times more. And they've been working on their blockchain technology for 3 years. Unlike Amazon, Facebook, and Google, they're only recently making noises about blockchain. Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent have been working on this longer, especially Alibaba. So there is one question to raise, is does geography really matter? If you look at things like Ethereum and some of these other projects, and the company I work for, we're 700 employees in 27 countries. It used to be that if you worked for Facebook or Google, you would, even though you're doing an internet thing, you have to all be in a row in a loft somewhere in San Francisco or New York to create the product. But now companies like Ethereum, like Gnosis, some of the others, they're not bound to a geography. So is that the future? Well, perhaps, but that future might take longer to happen than one might think. Geography matters in the case of Bitcoin mining. Bit mining is going away, but for a while China got 80% of the mining for Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And why did they do that? Because of the ecosystem, because they had Shenzhen, which is the Silicon Valley of hardware, where there are young people who have the skills to design semiconductors. They can connect with manufacturing companies, they can build servers, they can connect with low-cost electricity, hydroelectric power that's built by the government that has excess capacity. And perhaps there's a little bit of corruption there, I don't know. But in any case, this resulted in 80% of Bitcoin mining being done by 4 or 5 companies in China in just a short period of time. So that's a case where geography matters when you have the combination of speed, capital, infrastructure. So let's transition from China to blockchain. Blockchain, of course, the blockchain era, the internet of money, the internet of value, long-term global scale trend, technology-driven business transformation. We see that it's going to have impact equivalent to the internet, impact equivalent to the web over time, impacting all sectors of society, all regions, but it's going to take some time. We're going to go from the internet of data, which is TCP/IP 40 years ago, to the internet of content, HTTP, the web 20 years ago, and now the emerging era of the internet of money. You can view blockchain protocols as a transport protocol for value. But there are 4 roles of blockchain and cryptocurrency, so we want to distinguish this. And some of the talks have been focusing some of the different aspects. There's digital gold, which is a high friction store of value. It's like almost like buying physical gold. It's a pain to buy currency, the cryptocurrency. There's a high transaction fee. There's a long latency. And once you've done all that, just like with buying an ingot of gold, you're not going to take that and go to your corner store and buy a cup of coffee with a leather pouch of gold powder or necessarily some Bitcoin. But you're going to keep it as a store of value, a speculative store of value, just like people do in the real world with real gold. There's digital cash, which should be distinguished from cryptocurrency. I don't see people going to the corner store and buying the coffee or noodles with digital cash, and there are too many other alternatives. So that's despite what others, advocates might think. Then there's what I call fool's gold, which is really the ICO bubble. And that's really purely speculative. People aren't expecting it to be a store of value. They just want to double their money in 6 weeks and get out before everybody else tries to head for the exit. And lastly, what I want to talk about is blockchain platforms. So a platform, as I mentioned, it's a foundational technology for building decentralized solutions for decentralized business ecosystems. And there are certain things that blockchain can do that other systems cannot do, having to do with trust, with the immutable record, with smart contracts, with the resiliency, with the unblockability, lack of censorship. So what is a blockchain? You're probably familiar with this, so I won't go into detail. It's a trusted record of transactions and other valuable information. Trust is achieved by massive replication across the network, and there's a protocol for network-defined truth, which in some platforms is called mining, in others it's another mechanism. And there's an optional programmatic behavior that's attached to transactions. So the core concepts are decentralized trust. There's immutable log of significant events which can represent transactions or property ownership or other kinds of valued data like medical records. And there's a fine-grained dynamic behavior that's associated with the transactions, which is so-called smart contracts that are neither smart nor contracts, but they add some programmable behavior, and you get the internet of programmable value, or money with brains, money with wings. Now, our view for I wrote a paper on this in 2014, and I said at the time that Bitcoin was doomed to fail as a platform, not as a currency, and the reasons are, now widely known and appreciated. It's not scalable, transactions are not fully anonymous, it's not a real database, it's only a partial database. There's no query model, there's no efficiency, transaction costs are unpredictable. There's no finality. It's probabilistic rather than deterministic in terms of completion of transactions. Mining is the unintended consequence of the consensus mechanism design is that it's overly centralized. The ecosystem is untrustworthy, full of bad actors, and there's a crisis in governance that limits the evolution and adaptability of the platform. So I don't take a position on whether Bitcoin will succeed as a currency. I'm just talking about the platform. So these limitations are very evident. There's 100 different blockchain platforms that are being built, in some cases are released. And I've been tracking them. Actually, it's 101 now. I call it the 101 Dalmatians. They're all incompatible with each other at the moment, although there's about a half dozen or more proposed interoperability protocols like Polkadot and Plasma and Cosmos and ELF and ILP and Metronome and so on. But so we're in the very early stages. So who will win among all these platforms? And we haven't yet talked about China. We will in a moment. But this statement applies to both blockchain platforms in China, but also in the entire world. The one that will win is the one not yet on the market in its current form. And the reason I say that is I look at other sectors. Because right now, you have Bitcoin with like, say, 10, 15 million users. You have Ethereum with 10 or 15 million users. And then you have other platforms like Hyperledger Fabric, 0 million users in round numbers. R3 Corda, 0 million users. DA8, 0 million, so on. So we're in the very early stages. If you look at internet search engines in '95, you had AltaVista and Lycos and Terra and Excite and Magellan. They had tens of millions of users in production. And then Google came later and won. You look at social networks. In 2003, MySpace had 100 million users. And Friendster and Bebo and Orkut and High Five had many millions of users in production. And Facebook came later and won. If you look at mobile operating systems, Nokia had 300 million users. And BlackBerry and Windows Mobile, hundreds of millions of users in production. And iOS and Android came later and won. And so now we have the emerging cryptocurrency / blockchain space, 30 million users across 2, 3, a handful of platforms. So my point is that even if you had this other new generation of platforms and they had tens of millions of users in production, you can still make the case there will be a new entrant that will come and win. No platform today has all the winning characteristics. What we need is a safe, smart contract programming model. Smart contracts are dangerous. Today, you can write 200 lines of code. I guarantee you will have a bug that'll lose money. And it's happened because there's been a number of ICOs. The code for a smart contract in an ICO is 400 lines of code. And there's been bugs that people have lost all their funds. And I've worked on systems with millions of lines of code. When people say, we're going to revolutionize healthcare records, we're going to revolutionize supply chain, we're going to revolutionize government records. I know those systems. I built them. There are millions of lines of code. And here we have smart contracts that are 500 lines of code, and they have dangerous bugs. And that's just one area. And there's other characteristics. You need a platform to be scalable. You need to be open source. It needs to be battle tested as a public blockchain. Private blockchain is not good enough, but it needs to be configurable for private blockchain. There's no platform that has these characteristics and so on. You need better governance. You need an ecosystem of tools and frameworks and so on. I'm almost out of time. Yep. So China is very active in this area, as you might expect, for cultural reasons, for technical reasons, for ecosystem reasons. I mentioned already mining. There's exchanges. Some of the top 3 exchanges in the world have been based in China. Some of them are moving outside of China now. They're going to Singapore or Japan or Korea. There's investors. There's education. And there are blockchain platforms. I mentioned 100 different blockchain platforms worldwide. Well, about a quarter of them are ones based in China. The digital titans like Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent are building their own, established companies like Chong'an and Ping An insurance and construction companies. And then you'll see the names of some of these. And like half a dozen of these call themselves the Ethereum of China. They're as a platform. But Vitalik gave a presentation, Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum. He said, Ethereum is the Ethereum of China. So we're still in the very early stages. And I think personally that Ethereum is best positioned as the platform. It's battle hardened, there's ongoing work, they're facing the problems of scalability and privacy and smart contract safety. There's market momentum, but there are risks. We're still in the early stage. This is my last slide. So it's a horse race. The problem is there's a horse race where one horse has done 9 laps around the track. 9 years, that's Bitcoin. But that horse turns out to be a donkey. There's another horse, Ethereum, that's done 3 laps around the track. But it needs a heart transplant because it needs to go change the consensus mechanism from proof of work to proof of stake. There are several other horses running on a small private track, and they're not really in production. And then there's 90 other horses that are still in the stable, or someone has a white paper and they're looking in the fields for a horse to rope in. And there are 20 Chinese horses saddling up, and they're going to start the race on a separate government-issued track. So again, who's going to win? I can tell you what the winner will look like. I can tell you it's not any one of the current platforms in their current form. So enjoy the wild ride. Oh, yeah, one question.
Why don't we take 2 questions, 2 quick, short questions and short answers?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we start over there? Okay. And then in the meantime, the ICO pitches, please come and sit in the front row so we can start immediately. Everyone who's pitching, sit right here. Thank you.
Okay, so you just said Ethereum platform is still the platform for China. What about NEO? They're saying NEO is the Ethereum of China. And
well,
what about
there's 5 different platforms that use that language that say we're the Ethereum of China. We're the Ethereum of China. If you look at them,
what
they're
about
again.
Tango or Hashgraph? IOTA is using Tango, and Hashgraph is its own more advanced blockchain. How about those?
Every platform is addressing the issues of scalability, of privacy controls, but the thing is they're unproven. So Hashgraph is claiming hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, but again, these are black boxes. They're the horse that's still in the stable that no one has ever seen run 1 lap around the track. And the thing is, when horses start running around the track, they trip and stumble. The platforms, my view is that the platform that will succeed will have to be battle tested. Ethereum has been under continuous attack by some of the most hostile elements on the open internet for 3 years. And they've had their challenges and they've overcome them. And every other platform is going to have to face more similar challenges. So NEO, apparently, I'm trying to sort out what happened, but 2 weeks ago, March 4th, 3 weeks ago, their system went down. They had a failure of some sort. And it turned out, there are conflicting stories, but one version said they had 7 machines on their network and 1 machine went down and the whole thing went down. So, that's fine. I've built systems that are in version 0.1 or version 1.0 and they fall down. That's just how software works. So, I would wait 3 years and then see if it's the Ethereum of China.
All right, great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ray. Will you be here for our cocktail party?
Yeah, I'll be here for a while.
All right, let's give Ray a round of applause. Thank you for a great presentation.